Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast. My name is Tracy Shirk, and I'm the Chief Talent Officer here at Elevated Talent Consulting. And we have some fun today. We get to talk about pay and pay transparency and how that impacts the culture of our organization and how money makes people really weird and all the fun things with that. So I have an amazing guest on our show today. And Erin McAdams Franzblau is with me. And Erin is with Freeborn Peters Law Firm out of Chicago. So Erin, welcome.
Thanks so much, Tracy. I'm really thrilled to be here. Tracy and I work together for a number of businesses. And like Tracy said, I'm at Freeborn Peters in Chicago, where I do all things employment law, whether it's counseling, transactional, and even litigation. So I'm really happy to be here and talk about this topic.
Awesome. And thank you so much. And I think, Erin, as you know, and our listeners, we've had a couple other employment law attorneys on, but I'm really picky about my employment law attorneys because I want to make sure that they're going to take us as HR professionals kind of under their wings so we can understand the distinctions between, here's what we need to do to impact culture and employee retention and relationships. And here's how we create a great offense so that if something lands in their lap, they can defend it. And Erin's done a great job at that with our clients, and we so appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for saying that. That's very kind. And, it's all related because if you give your employees a good culture, you won't need the defense. But in case we do, let's line up all of our chess pieces to make sure we can make the best plays possible.
Absolutely. So we get to talk about money today in fun little ways, right?
Right.
So when we talk about wages for employees, one of the things that we do with all of our clients is we work with them to really set up a compensation structure and salary bands. And why is that important from a legal perspective?
Yeah, it's important for a couple reasons. The first is I'll give you a kind of general overview. We have several federal laws and a variety of state and local laws that give us regulations and limits on paying sexes differently, paying races differently, et cetera. So we have the Equal Pay Act, which says that you can't have a reason for paying people from two different sexes differently if it's based on sex.
Thank you to Lilly Ledbetter, in part.
Yeah, exactly. That extended part of the Equal Pay Act to extend part of the statute of limitations so that if you're paid unfairly, improperly based on sex, let's say 10 years ago, so the bad act occurred 10 years ago, every time you receive a paycheck after that, the discriminatory actions keep going such that you can bring your claim later. So that's federal law. Then we also have a variety of state laws. State laws might have their own version of equal pay legislation. They might have their own version of Title VII. And it might be more expansive. It might say we have protected characteristics based on sex, sexual orientation, non-binary status, for example, all sorts of different shades of protected characteristics. And usually in state law, we see that the way in which you can bring a claim is a little bit more relaxed. So basically, an individual has all sorts of protections, whether it's federal, state, or local law, in which they can't be paid less than someone else based on one of these protected characteristics, such as sex.
So the Cliff Notes version of this is a compensation structure and salary band protects you because you're doing it based on the job. So are the essential functions of the job as it's in your job description versus somebody coming and saying, it was on pay. Or it was on the sex or the race or any of those other protected classes.
Exactly. So the cases in the court really flesh that out, that you need to have a bona fide, non-discriminatory, sex-based, in the sense of the Equal Pay Act, reason for the pay discrepancies, such as something like education, a merit-based system, training, qualifications, production, those types of things. Those are all not based on sex or some other prohibited characteristic.
Awesome. So now that we kind of know what that is and know what these salary bands or compensation structures are, there's been a lot of buzz about pay transparency and pay transparency laws in some states like Colorado and a couple of others. So what is pay transparency and why do we care?
Yeah, it's huge right now. So there are really two prongs to this. The predecessor leading up to a lot of these pay transparency laws is the salary history ban. So it's telling employers, and we have these laws in about 30 states and localities, telling employers, employer, you are not allowed to ask a job applicant about his or her prior wages or salary history or benefits information, that type of thing. And the point of all of that and the intent is that we know that women and minorities in many industries are historically paid less. So when an employer relies on that salary history, that can just perpetuate the unlawful pay disparity. Because if a woman received, say, 15% less than the man in her prior job, she's going to keep receiving 15% less when she gets percentage-wise increases in her pay. So that's the salary history ban part of it. And when it first came out, everyone thought that, whoa, this is a culture shift because we haven't seen something like this. But, in Illinois and elsewhere, we're getting used to it. So it's interesting to see hearts and minds changing. Then the second part of that, which I think kind of brings to fruition more these legislatures' intent of fixing pay disparities, is pay transparency. So we only have about 13 laws on the books for states and localities. And these say to employers, when you post for a job, so for a prospective applicant, whether it's someone who's outside the company or someone already inside the company, you must list the job range or the salary for that position. And in some cases, and all the laws are different, you must list benefits information and bonus information and stuff like that. And you have to give a good faith estimate of what you think you would pay for this position. And again, the point of this is to again address these unlawful historical pay discrepancies and disparities for women and minorities, and to really arm employees with the information so that when they go in for an interview, they know what to ask when they're negotiating their salary.
Yeah, absolutely. And the impact of this on employers across different states, which is where we kind of come into this. So in Wisconsin, there's a lot of laws that are in Illinois that are not in Wisconsin, right? And so, a lot of our clients right now are Midwest based, yet we've got clients all over the country. But with that being said, the reason why I wanted to have you on, Erin, is because regardless of where you're at, this is coming in one way, shape, or form. And if you are hiring remote workers, which the majority of our clients are at this point in time, it's really important to note every time you hire a remote worker, guess what? Now you have to play by the state and municipality law rules for that employee based on where they are working. And so with that being said, we have a client that has a base in the Midwest, and yet, so they're following Midwest laws based on their location. No problem, right? But yet they've got employees, let's say, I think New York, Florida, Colorado, Montana, and Kansas, I believe. So anyway, if we look at those are all sorts of fun states, and all of them have very different laws. But when we specifically look at pay transparency, does a law in one state create an impact on all of the other employees inside the organization?
Yeah, great question. It kind of, this is the lawyerly answer. It depends. And it does and it doesn't.
You're not allowed to use it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
And we're not giving legal advice. I can't. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know that, but Erin can't. So
exactly.
Here. You can talk to her one-on-one and she can then.
Exactly. But I'll first say you said something really important in there, which is kind of a key tenet of employment law, which is do not forget that wherever you have an employee and that employee is physically sitting, we are going to assume that that is the law that will apply. That body of employment laws are the laws that will apply, because the idea is The
Can we
employee
just say that again? Because that is missed so often. I'm like, well, what
Yeah.
states are they? And then they tell me, I'm like, you realize that here's the law there. They're like, no, why? I'm like,
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
It just is.
Right. And it's two important reasons. And I'll say it again. The state where the employee is physically sitting in her wheelie chair in her living room is the employment laws that will apply to that state. And the reason is that the employee is, let's say, a citizen of the state of Colorado. She's paying taxes to the state of Colorado. In the state of Colorado's mind, she should get to avail herself of those very employee-friendly employment laws. So do not forget that. Also, this is kind of a separate non-employment thing, but if you have employees working in other states, even if they're remote employees, you might be doing enough business in that state that you need to register to do business in that state. So again, not legal advice, but that could be the case. So
however, workers' comp and your employment, your payroll tax, all those things have to be done in those states, and that becomes administratively not fun.
Right. So the other part of these laws is that you have the employee in Colorado, and under the Colorado pay transparency law, having one employee work in the state and be a Colorado employee subjects you to the Colorado law, at least for purposes of that Colorado employee and anyone else who could be working in the state of Colorado. So what does that mean? So the Colorado guidance and the New York City guidance says the same thing for pay transparency. It says that, okay, you have one employee in Colorado, so you're subject to the Colorado law. So therefore, if you post a job that could be performed in Colorado, whether it's remote or not, then you have to follow the Colorado laws. So keep in mind, you have that one employee in Colorado subjecting you to the law. That means even if you're an Illinois employer and you have your factory in Illinois, but you have some back office positions that could be performed remotely, they could be performed from Hawaii or wherever, and you're posting for a remote position, the fact that it could be performed in Colorado or the fact that the job could be performed in New York City means that you must follow those jurisdictions' laws.
Let me make sure I understand this. So if I go out on Indeed and post a remote position, I have to technically be in compliance with every single state's laws?
Not necessarily every state's laws, but every state that you're subject to. So we know that you as a company are subject to the laws of the state of Colorado because you have one employee.
Got it. Okay.
Right. So let's say you don't have employees in Alabama, you wouldn't have to be subject to the laws of Alabama.
Got it. That is super helpful. So I just want to bring this back for a second for those of you listening. And I just want to do just kind of a quick recap because we've talked about a lot of things. So we believe that offense is the best defense as far as a legal standpoint. So that's why we set up things like compensation plans and salary bands. Again, a salary band is essentially stating every job that has these requirements for the job get this kind of level of pay in that pay range. That's a salary band. And then we're saying, hey, we're no longer going to say, hey, what did you make at that last job? Because it's illegal in 30 states, not every state, but it's something to be cognizant of based on, regardless of where you're at, because you're bringing folks in from all over the place. And so then pay transparency essentially states in certain states, you need to post those wage bands so that they know what they potentially could be making coming in. And typically those states also say you can't ask them what that is. So there's our quick recap. What I want to kind of just talk about for a second, Erin, before I throw it back to you, is what is the impact of the culture inside the organization? And all of a sudden we get employees going blah, 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 angry, upset, or excited, all those things, right? So when we think about these law changes, there's a significant impact that happens on the culture. And as an organization, it's really important to take a step back and say, hey, what do we want our employees to think of us? I love to call this, what is the compensation story that we are telling our employees? Are we stating to them that we're valuing men more than women, as was the case that we saw in the Lilly Ledbetter that we talked about previously? Or are we saying we value you based on the expertise and the experience and the work that you are bringing and producing inside of our organization. And guess what? Ding, ding, ding. That is the right answer. So with that being said, that culture becomes really important. And when we are not transparent with what we're doing, I kind of laugh about this all the time, but it's like I say to my husband, hey, guess what? If you don't tell me something, I make it up. And I can guarantee you what I make up is going to be worse than what you tell me.
Yeah. And I mean, you're exactly right that the culture around all of this is changing so rapidly. I saw a photo of a billboard in New York City. I don't know what organization it was, but it said, if your salary is so competitive, why don't you tell me what it is? And, employees, the larger culture, they're thinking about all of this. They know that the laws are changing, or they kind of hear a buzz about it. And let's say they're in Illinois where we don't have a pay transparency law yet, but I'm sure we will soon. And all of a sudden they see, oh, there's a posting for my same job in New York City, and this is the range. And yeah, it's a different jurisdiction, but why is it so much higher than what I'm making now? Or what can happen a lot with small startup companies is as the company grows, maybe they have to bring someone in that, the company feels we need to pay more just to bring this person in, and it's 5 years down the line, and we need to pay them a bump to get them to come in. And then all of a sudden, employees know that, hey, the person who just came in is making a lot more than people who have been there for 5 years and given 5 years to the company. So employers are having to take a really hard look at these questions. And, that's what the laws are really doing. And we're advising some employers that now is the time to think about doing a pay equity audit. So really looking at employees across protected characteristics such as age, sex, race, etc., and making sure that we have a bona fide, legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for pay discrepancy. And that if we see a big discrepancy that's different among protected characteristics, we have a reason that we can give. And sometimes this even involves telling your employees that this is what you're doing, that you care about pay equity. You're taking a hard look at what everyone's making to make sure that it's equitable and that you have a philosophy, like you said, Tracy, that you have some philosophy that is demonstrable, that you can explain, and that's not based on a protected characteristic. And sometimes being that open with employees makes them feel better, just like the example you gave with your husband. But it's obviously a Pandora's box, because once you give more information, then maybe you get more questions, and you have to be willing to answer those questions. So it's a very tricky, nuanced issue for sure.
And here's the thing that I've learned from experience is there are times where you, in a way, open Pandora's box, so to say, to an issue because you know that it hasn't been done right previously, but you're committed to drawing the line in the sand and going forward. And that's where it's getting all those kind of ducks in a row to ensure that they are answering the questions honestly, and also working with an employment law attorney to say, hey, we know here's our risks. We also know here's what we're doing going forward, and we don't want to continue creating risk. We want to stop it now and move forward. So we know that there may be some unintended consequences to this. And so we're going to prepare for those ahead of time, hoping that they don't come forward, but knowing that some of them probably will. But we are committed to this intention of doing the right thing and doing it in a transparent way. That's going to win every day of the week. And when we talk about employee retention and recruitment right now, this has a huge impact on recruitment and retention and ensuring that we're bringing the right employees in based on those items. And one thing that I hear from employers all the time is, hey, I don't want to share what our wages are because I don't want them to think that we either pay too much, too less. I don't want a competitor to $1 up me or whatever that is. And my response is, pay is table stakes. Pay is table stakes. It is those other things that are going to make the differentiator in your culture. If your culture is crap in a box, guess what? That $1 an hour is not going to matter. What will matter is the reason why people stay, whether it's appreciation or they're in the right job or they have the professional development Are their managers leading them the way that they need to be led? All of those items, because pay becomes table stakes. It is the bottom layer in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So paying attention to that allows us to move those things forward.
Right, for sure. Those are all excellent points. And I'll also just echo your first point, which is you're exactly right that sometimes we just need to cut off the risk that we're seeing and kind of stop that hamster wheel of the past, whatever the company did, and just move forward and just accept that. And just kind of saying, oh, we'll just wait until litigation happens or something. You don't want to go there.
Yeah. And it is not fun, and it is not easy, and it is hard, and it is all of those things.
Right. Once you go through it, maybe that's when you realize this is really expensive. And so I better fix those other culture things that you're talking about, which are exactly the things that keep employees and don't necessitate having to put in the resources, the time, money, et cetera, to hire new people, train them, all of that.
Yeah. So as we start to kind of close here, Erin, I'm curious, what's a key takeaway that you have for executives listening into our conversation today?
It's a real changing landscape in labor laws nationally. I think everyone can see that. We never thought that, labor unions would have the resurgence that they're having now. The laws are rapidly changing. And it's one thing to kind of have the knee-jerk reaction of, oh my gosh, this is going to be a lot of work. And I don't want to, disclose our pay band to the public. But also, this is just the future and this is the now. And this is something that is changing in our culture and in hearts and minds. And you just have to get with the picture on now. And there's so many different laws all across the US that are very different. And it takes a while if you're operating in many states to figure out what Washington State requires and Colorado requires and New York City requires, and make sure that you have all your ducks in a row so that you're following the letter and the spirit of the law by the time these new laws come out.
And what I'll say, especially for a lot of our small employers that are out there, you just need an expert in your back pocket. You need to be able to ask the question, to throw the red flag up, to say, I know I don't need to know all of this, but I need to know the question to ask. And that's where Erin and Freeborn come in, or myself and Elevated Talent is, we're experts in our area to really support you to say, you focus on building your business and what that is. There's things that we can, support you on to ensure that some of those items are taken care of, right? So as we talked about creating that offense, our hire program is opening up here in a couple of weeks, and we have an entire week that we train you on how to create the compensation structure and how to create those things and how to do the equity audit that Erin talked about. And then saying, hey, before you put any of this out there, we are not attorneys, check in with an attorney, and here's a great one, right?
Yeah, I echo all of that, Tracy. Exactly. Yeah.
So for HR professionals listening in today, I think the other thing that we would say is make sure you're paying attention to what these are. And if you don't have a salary band in place, please put one in place and understand what that transparency looks like and means.
Yeah, great points. And, it can be helpful to get notifications from SHRM or something like that, just because it can seem overwhelming because we're operating in this day and age many times in many states, but also different cities, counties, and the laws are constantly changing. But to just kind of have your pulse on, oh, I heard that Illinois just passed this about sick leave, or I heard that, this was going on in Cook County or in Madison, wherever. Then you can refer to those experts in your back pocket, like Tracy and myself, to be able to say, I heard about this. I know it's important. I don't have time to work on it, but you tell me what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have office hours every Monday at 1:00 that we're going through a lot of the things that are coming up because we've got a pulse on what's happening. Mm-hmm. So with that, Erin, thank you so much for being with us. And we will have in the show notes that they can find you at the Freeborn website, but also your LinkedIn. Is there any other places that you want them to find you at?
I'm a big proponent of LinkedIn, but not really on social media. So it's all LinkedIn.
Good deal. Awesome. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I hope that you all have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.